researcher and expert on design thinking. I was personally really excited to bring design thinking to this summit because it is an incredible tool that can be used to reconceive, reframe ideas, and especially from the ideation phase. So I want to give Joana the floor here for the next 40 minutes to walk through the magic of design thinking. Joana, everybody.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to stand here between both screens. I don't like the stage so much. So I hope you've all enjoyed that amazing lunch. May I ask you to just stand up and stretch it out a little bit? Maybe like just give a hug and a high five person next to you. Just get the energy moving a little bit. Amazing, amazing. Okay, great. And when you're ready, it's really great to be here with you today for a number of different reasons. The first reason I'll share with you is I actually spent quite a lot of time in Bali, and it's been a really beautiful place that inspires my work so much. So my work in design and sustainability that I'll come and share with you. I hope that what I'm about to share will inspire you in your commitments and the wonderful projects you are working on. I hope it also gives you a little bit of a glimpse of what design is about and the design thinking process, just to get an idea who is familiar with design thinking. Has anyone come across this process before? Okay, great. So it will be hopefully a aha moment to many of you. So let's kick off. A little bit about me and where my heart sits. I'm a designer and a researcher. I work with many startups, but also big corporates on understanding humans' motivations, needs, behaviors. I'm also a professor at a university in Berlin that is very much focused on technology, so that's something that I'll be talking to you about a little bit as well, and the potentials of technology. And I truly believe that we need to stick to our values and our ethics when we put things out into the world, products and services. This is home. I'm from Portugal originally, so I actually grew up down the road from this. And the ocean, you know, as somebody who dives and surfs a little bit, is really a second home in many ways. I'm from a country of sailors. You know, the village where my family lives, is very much dependent on ocean. And I've also been so privileged as a designer to work in so many different locations around the world. This is in Oman. So I've seen the ocean and the potential of it in many different places. This is Nusa Penida in Bali, which all of you should get the chance to visit if you can. So, you know, the nature as designer in itself. So design helped us become human, right? Ever since we've invented fire. Everything we do in our everyday is an act of design. We are creative problem solvers by nature. And that's the definition I want you to take with you. But I also want to say that design is the practice of discernment. So the word discernment, meaning to understand what is possible, what we should do, what is possible to do. It's amazing to have like big goals, but we need to understand what is it that we can do in the short term exactly. Like what are the practical moves we can do in our everyday towards that big vision. So that's where design comes in. It gives us these tools and these processes. Design thinking is a process, and I'm going to give you a little recap of what this is about. You might have heard the buzzword, and it's much more than that. the mindsets of somebody who practices design thinking, or of the designer, and all of you. These are 5 key points to keep in mind. So be curious about everything and everyone around you. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Stretch, so think outside the boundaries. There's no such thing as silly questions or crazy ideas. Be playful, because if you're not enjoying it, then there's no point doing it. I tell you right away. Like, whatever you do, you need to be enjoying yourself. Build to think, so that means we learn by making, right? We learn by prototyping things. That's how we know if something is working and something is not working. And I'm sure many of you have been practicing this as you build your projects and your commitments. And sense. So this is about common sense, but it's also about getting a feel of how people respond to what you're building, right? To the things you're putting out into the world, into people's lives that will impact them. So what is design thinking? It's about creative problem solving. It's about understanding how do we design for the needs of people. Needs, but also fears, motivations, desires, dreams. And it's about being right by side the people that we're designing for or with. And I highlight the word with a lot, because I think often when we don't include the people, the users or the consumers in the process, then we're not doing them a favor, right? So we always start with empathy. Empathy is the key word, and you'll be hearing a lot of this one. And it's about practicing empathy. It's about removing our cultural biases, like the lenses that prevent us from knowing the other. So being curious about everyone around you is a great start. So design thinking sits in between these 3 areas. And some of you might have come across this diagram online, possibly. It's a very important one. So when we talk about innovation and designing new solutions that are innovative, we're talking about feasibility in terms of technology. So is it feasible? Can we actually build this today? Or are we thinking 10 years, 20 years from now? Is it desirable? Do people actually care about it? Would they use it? And how do we know that? And is it viable in terms of a business? So do we have enough people to make this happen? Is it a solopreneurship project, or do we need an army of people to go out and make it happen? So the design thinking process and the toolbox of the designer, I shared this one in the slides that you guys, the PDF that some of you might, hopefully all of you, had a chance to check out before the event. It goes a little something like this. So you start by asking a question. So framing questions. This is something we'll be practicing in tomorrow's workshop session. And then we gather inspiration. So that means we go out, we actually interact with the humans, with the environment that we're designing for, and we try to understand it. And then we synthesize those insights. What did we learn? Like, what are the key things that we need to keep in mind for our solution? Then we start generating some ideas. So this is where the word brainstorming comes in, right? So you can have brainstorming as a group, which works amazing, and we'll be doing that one. And then you start to make ideas tangible. So this is prototyping, and there's many, many ways to prototype. And to, in 1 minute, know, does this idea work or will it fail? How do we know if it will work? And then once you've done enough of that, you can actually put a real MVP or a final prototype out into the world, and you can test and learn from it. So you learn from the way people use your product, service, system, whatever it is that you've built. And then you share the story, and sharing the story is a massive part of generating impact. Because if people don't understand the why you built this thing in the first place, and what question is it answering, like what problem is it solving, They don't understand. We're humans, and humans are moved by stories. So this is the larger toolbox kit, which you all have access to, and tomorrow we'll be diving into some of these to try it out. So like I said, it starts with a question, and the how might we questions are really important ones. We're going to be practicing this one. And the reason why we use how might we, it's because it opens up possibility. So it's not like scaling down to, oh no, but we can't really do that. We don't have the resources, or we don't have the people power, or we don't have the technology. So you're opening up. You're saying, how might we solve this, or how might we get those people engaged with our mission? So design thinking is an iterative process, right? The word iterative means we go round and round and round many times until we get it right. It feels pretty often like this. We broaden our ideas, and then we focus them in, and we broaden them out again. But in the middle, it can get confusing. And it often sounds like this. So these are phrases that we hear quite a lot. We are doing this already, right? This is interesting, but this will never work in our school. Maybe we should give it a try. Ooh, that's exciting. This feels exactly right. So hopefully by the end, you all will feel this feels exactly right. The second part to this little nugget of information I'd like to show you is a piece of research that I did for quite a few years on qualities of sustainability. So the reason why I think this is important to share with you alongside the design thinking process is the design thinking process in itself is quite generic, so it can apply to any problem you're trying to solve. But you guys are tackling quite specific problem. And this is where I hope it's useful to you. So I'd like you to think of a memorable experience. Like, what's the most memorable experience you ever had? Like, off the top of your head, remember that time when ... Just give you a moment, and then I'll ask a brave one of you to share. Yeah? Did you raise your hand? Okay, I'm coming over.
Does it have to have any specific quality, or is it? Okay. So a memorable moment was going up in so I was together with WWF in Kalimantan, going up a river, and we were going, it was like very deep into the forest already, and we stopped at a community and went into the house of the elderly of the village, who is usually responsible for managing or is part of the communication, but also kind of manages the village. And he's shown us this document of like 500 to 600 pages from a palm oil company that was going to set foot in the area, and they did a social and environmental impact assessment, like handing it over to the people there that hardly were able to read, right? So they were just basically giving them something not to be able to work with. And they basically didn't have a choice on like allowing these people to come, the palm oil plantation to come in or not to come in. So there was a moment of helplessness, I guess. And in that way, so for me it was also a tipping point, but also, yeah, it was very memorable just by seeing this vulnerability in a way. And that's why I think it stuck with me forever.
Vulnerability, that's the key word that I take from it. Okay, we're going to come back to this. So people often won't remember the words you've said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. So in this case, vulnerability or experiencing how the others were feeling vulnerable by being given this getting it right, this document to read, right, and kind of seeing the context of that was what you took with you. Experience is really important, right? So when we tell stories, people often take away in their mind a version of the real story. But they will always take with them what they actually felt when they were listening to it. And I want to make a little parenthesis here to give you guys an idea of what's happening in terms of design and experiences. I think this might be useful to your missions. So for example, this is the Museum of Ice Cream in New York last year, which was an exhibition that was like crazy people lining up. It's about ice cream, right? Like we all know what ice cream is about. But the thing that's why it's an interesting case study is because people got to actually experience a lot more than just having an ice cream in their mouth. So it's about playing with the senses beyond one sense. Another amazing example of why experiences are right now something to consider as important is in terms of purchasing. The millennial generation is a lot more interested in buying experiences than buying things, than buying more stuff, than acquiring more goods. And there's some incredible studies being done in this moment of why the experience economy, as some people have come to call it, is important for us to know about. Similarly, Airbnb, right? The fact that people don't really like the digital nomads type. They don't want to own a home. They want to move around. They want to experience different cultures, different environments. Or events like Burning Man, if some of you have heard about this, and other types of alike events and festivals where it's about coming together and taking something with you that is not a purchase good. So not to go into so much detail, but just if you're interested, I'm happy to tell you more about this. I think in terms of when it comes to sustainability initiatives, and in your case, ocean-related initiatives, considering the experience that people have with your product, service, movement, community, is really, really important. So how to amplify qualities of sustainability in this experience economy? This was my question for about 5 years of research. And in the process of trying to understand this, I got to meet so many different startups, social enterprises around the world focused on, in this case, it was sustainable food production and the future of food production. I do have one example that relates to the ocean, so I'll share that with you. And I found that, if design is about making us human or helping us understand our humanity as well, some of these initiatives and businesses were doing a great job at this. This is a beautiful photo that a photographer I took along with me in field research. She's an anthropologist and she's also a photographer. And she really captured like some expressions in moments of interactions that were very beautiful and very genuine and showed vulnerability among other qualities. So I got to do this research also in so many different cultural contexts, which is something so important to think about for your projects. If you're thinking, we think global, but we act local as well. So when you're trying to get reach around the world and people on board your idea, you need to think about local culture as well. Because there's definitely nuances there. And I got to learn about what are the qualities that these businesses have that gets the public to want to participate. And so many of those are global. So as humans, we all feel the same way, but many of them are local as well. So different culture differences. But I'll tell you that the commonality worldwide, at least from what I got to see, was that these ones in orange are the common ones. So things like our understanding of place, of where things are coming from, like the pride of being from somewhere, having something grown somewhere. Relationships, like the importance of building community, or the understanding of time was also one, how long things take to grow, or work, for example, like the pride in craftsmanship and so on. Transparency is a very, very important one, and I got to see it in different ways. That's why I want to share this one with you. For example, letting people into the back end or the back office or where things are actually made, giving them like full access. Transparency, also through the use of technology in many cases. Community, super important. Like we can meet online and we definitely find each other online, but when we come together in real life, just like this, changes everything, changes the dynamic. So keep that one in mind. The sense of place, so cultural context, having an identity in itself. This is a really great example I wanted to share with you. Provenance is a company based in London. They did an amazing project here in Indonesia using blockchain to track where coconuts are being produced and transported all the way to Europe. This was a little prototype of this startup. They're now doing very well. So they took huge effort to try to prove a point, because they wanted to understand how much are people getting paid along the way of the supply chain. And they managed to do that. Time. This is a vertical farm in Berlin. So it's an indoor farm. And I met them first in 2012. They've now grown to 2 massive warehouses. And the whole point of their existence is to have people understand how long a lettuce actually takes to grow if it's grown organically, and how to bring this knowledge to people in urban environments that are so disconnected from agriculture. Relationships. This is another company that I've worked with in Chile, and it's a family farm. They grow, they have an olive production, but also wine production. So they're building apps that help small-scale farmers keep better track of how much water their trees retain in the soil. So it's actually pioneering a movement around small-scale farming all over the world now. And personal meaning. So this is my ocean-related example. So I worked with this company called Soul Share in the UK, founded by 2 marine biologists. So it's a community initiative, and it's also a fish supplying business. So what's special about them is that they don't have a shop, and they don't sell their fish in any shops. Instead, they have a map, and the consumer needs to meet them on a specific location at a specific time to pick up their fish. And you would ask yourselves, why would anyone living in central London, it's 10 million people in the city, why would anyone bother to go and meet these 2 guys to buy some fish when you can do that from a supermarket, right? So it's about the qualities, right? Because when you do meet up with Jack in like a little corner in central London, and he's a marine biologist, and he can tell you the story of how the weather was this morning when Tom, the fisherman, just brought in the fish and his catch of the day. So he'll tell you about the season, he'll tell you about the fish stock in the oceans at the moment. So he tells you a story. So you buy that story. It's not so much about the fish or the crab or whatever catch of the day, it's about the story. And that's what's making them successful in that way. So I want to tell you about the challenge, and I think you guys more than me will probably, the younger amongst you will get to really live this challenge, as many of my students do, which is the 4th Industrial Revolution. Is anyone familiar with this term? The 4th Industrial Revolution. Okay, amazing. So the 4th Industrial Revolution is the term used by the World Economic Forum and other organizations to explain the phenomenon around emerging technologies. So everything from artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, automation, drones, all of that. There's a lot of criticism around the fourth industrial revolution. Some people are very afraid what's going to happen when artificial intelligence is in place. Will we all run out of jobs because computers can do our jobs? We don't need humans anymore. There's a lot of this kind of fear. But there's a couple of people, more than a couple, but a couple of very important people, namely at the World Economic Forum, who really think otherwise, and who actually see this as an opportunity to amplify the value that we want to bring and to solve the challenges that we want to solve. So if we get this right, this combination between how do we use technology as a force for good, how do we use technology to better transparency, to improve relationships, to bridge people across cultures, how do we use technology to actually build more resilience into our ecosystems, natural ecosystems and artificial ecosystems, both, we can actually do pretty well as a human species on this planet. So with all of that said, tomorrow we have a hands-on session where we get to implement some design thinking tools into your projects. And I hope this overload of information but also gives you some inspiration and some insight into what design is about. And I really look forward to learning more about your projects. I've already had a chance to talk to some of you, so I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. One more time for Joanna, everybody. So now we will go into the much touted ideas marketplace. You may have seen the instructions over Facebook and what